Hello, my name's Alison Entrekin and I'm a literary translator from Portuguese. I'm going to read to you today from a book called Reinações de Narizinho, which I've translated here as The Adventures of Button, and it's by Monteiro Lobato. And generations of Brazilians have grown up reading this 1931 classic, which recounts the adventures of a gang of kids from Yellow Woodpecker Farm as they first travel to the kingdom of clear waters and then to other magical kingdoms. In addition to characters of Lobato's own invention, he also borrows from an entire pantheon of world literary classics, ranging from Charles Perrault's Tales of Mother Goose to Aesop's Fables and the Arabian Nights. The result is a series of humorous escapades across several thousand years of literary and oral history. Now, Narizinho is her name in Portuguese, which means little nose, and I've called her Button from Button Nose in English. Button visits a magical underwater kingdom in the company of Amelia, her ragdoll, as the guest of a fish prince. And while there, she comes across a certain Mrs. Roach, who is actually Dona Carochinha, is a kind of Portuguese equivalent to Mother Goose. This particular chapter is called At the Palace. It's about chapter 3 or 4 of the book. The prince glanced at his watch. "It's time for my royal audience," he said. "Come quickly. I have a lot of cases to hear." Off they went. They headed straight for the throne room where Button sat by the prince's side as if she were a princess. What a beautiful room. It was made of milk-white coral and fringed with moss-like fronds of pearls that quivered in the slightest breeze. The iridescent mother-of-pearl floor was so smooth that Amelia slipped on it 3 times. The prince tapped on a conch shell with a large black pearl to begin the session. The butler introduced the first plaintiffs, a bunch of naked mollusks, shivering with cold. They had come to complain about the hermit crabs. "Who were these hermit crabs?" asked Button. "There's some crabs who are always making off with these poor mollusks' shells, leaving them stark naked in the sea. They're our worst thieves." The prince resolved the matter by ordering that a new shell be given to each mollusk. Then an oyster came forward to complain about a crab who had stolen her pearl. "It was still a young pearl and so splendid," said the oyster, drying her tears. "He stole it out of spite, because crabs don't eat pearls or wear them as jewels. I bet he's already dumped it on the sand somewhere by now." The prince resolved the matter by ordering that the oyster be given a new pearl of the same size. Just then, a little cockroach in a headscarf scurried into the room, looking flustered, and picked her way through the other creatures until she reached the prince. "What are you doing here, ma'am?" said the prince in surprise. "What can I do for you?" "I'm looking for Tom Thumb," she replied. "2 weeks ago he ran away from the book where he lives, and I can't find him any more. I've searched high and low in every enchanted kingdom there is, and I can't find a trace of him." "Who is this old cockroach?" Button whispered in the prince's ear. "She looks familiar." "I'm sure she does, as there isn't a girl alive who doesn't know the celebrated Mrs. Roach from the storybooks, the most famous cockroach in the world." And turning to Mrs. Roach, he said, "I'm not aware if Tom Thumb is here in my kingdom. I haven't seen him, nor have I heard from him, but you're welcome to look around. Be my guest." "Why did he run away?" asked Button. "I don't know," replied Mrs. Roach, "but I've noticed that several of the characters in my stories are growing tired of spending their lives trapped inside them. They want a change of pace. They talk about traveling the world in search of new adventures. Aladdin has been complaining that his marvellous lamp is getting rusty. Sleeping Beauty wants to prick her finger on another spindle and sleep for another 100 years. Puss in Boots had a fight with the Marquis of Carabas and wants to go to the United States to visit Felix the cat. Snow White keeps talking about dyeing her hair and wearing rouge. They're all up in arms, and it's hard work keeping them under control. But the worst thing is that they've been threatening to run away And now Tom Thumb has gone and set an example. Button was so tickled by the uprising that she clapped her hands with glee, hoping to cross paths with one of those beloved characters. Mrs. Roach proceeded. It's all because of Pinocchio, Felix the cat, and, above all, a certain little girl with a button nose that they all want to meet. I'm beginning to suspect that it was this devil child who led Tom Thumb astray and told him to run away. Button's heart beat quickly. But do you know this girl? She asked, covering her nose for fear of being recognised. I don't, replied Mrs. Roach, but I know she lives in a little white house in the company of 2 old prunes. Now, why did she have to go and say that? When Button heard her call Grandma Bento an old prune, she lost her temper. Bite your tongue, she cried, red with rage. You are the old prune, and such a grump that no one wants anything to do with your musty old stories any more. I am the girl with the button nose, but I'll have you know, I didn't lead Tom Thumb astray or tell him to run away. It wasn't my bright idea, but guess what? From now on, I'm going to tell him and everyone else to run away from your mildewy old books. The irate cockroach threatened to flatten her upturned nose if she ever found herself alone with her. And I'll turn up your flat nose, do you hear me? Calling Grandma Bento an old prune, what cheek. Mrs. Roach stuck out her tongue, very thin, dry tongue, and left in a huff, pouting and grumbling under her breath. The prince gave a sigh of relief when the incident was over. Then he declared the session finished and told the Prime Minister, "Send invitations to all of the noble men and women in the court for the big party that I am going to throw tomorrow in honour of our distinguished visitor. And tell Master Prawn to prepare the state coach for a ride around the bottom of the sea.